Excellent. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to Living the Next Chapter, a podcast focusing on authors and audiences. And our tagline here for our podcast is "Today is where your book begins." And it's interesting to talk today to our guest, a novelist coming out with a novel in about 3 months from the time of recording this podcast. And depending on when you're listening, we'll always have links below in the podcast notes so you can find this. But today we have Mick Smith on, and he is here to talk to us today about a novel that he's written, and it's called Burning America in the Best Interests of the Children with a question mark. And it leads to the question, what this novel is about, and the story behind it. We have a lot to unpack today. Very happy to have Mick Smith with me today. Mick, thank you so much. We had a little bit of fun getting connected, but we're here. We're ready to go. Are you ready? You all buckled in?
I am ready, and good to see you again, Dave.
Excellent. So you in the background here, for those that can't see what I'm seeing, I see a beautiful Buick in the background. Let's just address the Buick behind you in your screen behind you. Tell me a little bit about the Buick and a little bit of the story behind that.
Sure, there is a story behind that, because other than my mom, that was my dad's baby. So he really did baby it a lot. It was my parents' first new car. It's the 1957 Buick Special Riviera 46-R. And I know everything about it. That's why I go into such detail. I even got a blog site on it. So I keep it in memory of my dad. He really loved that car. And there's a lot of things in terms of family history as well, too. I was in the back seat fighting with my sister all the time. And but I mean, we always took that on family trips. It was the car that we always had. So even though we had a second car or other cars, I mean, this was the car that I grew up in and that my parents really loved. And it meant a lot to them because it was their first new car. Pretty amazing. It's one of those things back in the day. They were actually 25 years old. And by that time, they had a new car, which was the Buick, and a second car, and had bought a house. And they actually came from nothing. A lot of people would say small town in upstate PA, high school education. My dad was a factory worker. Mom was a stay-at-home mom, but great people, fantastic parents. I feel very fortunate from coming from that home.
Amazing. And I love the connection with a car, right? There's stories wrapped up inside of those seats and behind those windows. There's many stories. There's road trips. There's scrapping with your sibling in the back seat. There's everything, right? And I love the memory attached, and I love that you keep that alive behind you. That's inspiring.
It's pretty awesome. Yes, we grew up in New Jersey. My parents bought it in their hometown in upstate Pennsylvania, Honesdale, Pennsylvania, and that actually was the car we drove out to California in 1969. So yes, there's a lot of memories in that car.
Beautiful. It's excellent. And it's a great tribute. I love it. You caught my eye from the moment we met, and I'm like, oh, I got to know about this car. So for those that are going to see this video on YouTube and stuff, check out the car. It's great. It's really nice. My dad has passed, but he was a car guy. He could tell you every single year, model year, every option, just by the headlights of any car. He worked at a dealership and stuff as well. And his passion for cars, what he was doing before he passed away, was he was collecting little model scale cars of his cars that he owned growing up. And I have them as in a special place here in our home, but he has the same car, the same year, and the same color of the cars that he owned in little models. And those are what I get to keep. And every time I walk by them, that's all I can do is think of him. So
that is unbelievable that you're saying that, actually, because I did the very same thing. I have a 1957 Buick Special ad that my parents had, and I've got it on the wall. And I also got a car for each one, an ad that came from the actual cars that we had. So we had some other cars as well. We had a Ford Anglia, we had a Chevy 2, we had a Ford Fairlane, and I started the same process with my first two cars, the ones that I'm really close to. I had vans at the time. This was back in the day. So I had two vans, and I've got the ads from 1969 Chevy van, 3 on the tree, my first car, and a 74 Chevy van with a 350 V8. That's the same exact thing.
Wow. My dad had an Anglia as well. So yeah, pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. I love how cars connect us back to memories, but also connect us personally when we can share those kind of things. So that's great. It's a great way to start the podcast, and I really appreciate
It
you
is.
sharing
Yeah.
that.
Cars and music, and you're a musician as well too.
Yeah.
So the cars and the music, they all came together because we were driving around. And again, back in the day, we had 8-track tapes. So
Yes,
8 tracks.
that's it. I would love to take my kids back in the day and let them experience that moment of what is an 8-track. It'd be great for them to get a little sense of that.
Cool.
Excellent. So let's jump into your novel. Yeah, well, before that, let's take a little backstory a little bit to what was the inspiration for your novel. And I know this story is deep and meaningful to you personally. And I'd love to kind of be able to share a little bit with the audience so that they could kind of catch up to our conversation so far. And if you can kind of bring us up to speed, and then we'll start talking about the novel.
All right, sounds good. Yes, like anything, it is a work of fiction. It is a novel, so it's a fictionalized version. But then, like most authors would tell you, and if you're writing a novel, it is based on real experiences. But the reason I thought it was a good story is the fact that I don't think it could have made it up. And that's what makes it so real and so pressing, because so many things happen and so many unusual things happen. Because at the time I was experiencing some of these things myself, and then talking to the friends and family, it was kind of mind blowing. Like, how could this possibly be? How could this possibly happen? So it says to me and suggested to me that, something like this might make a good story. So I thought, yeah, I think you're right. So it's real in the sense that many of the things that I'm talking about are actual real events to real human beings. But then I also think that it tells a good story, and it tells an interesting story. Now, the odd thing about it is that I've gone through my entire life where I've been knowing what I experienced, and I ran into other people who experienced very similar kinds of things. To me, it's kind of suggesting that maybe this is a topic that should be discussed a little bit more and people are more familiar with, or should be. So essentially what happens is I got a surprise. I call it, a wake-up call, because I pulled up in my driveway one day and everything was gone. So literally everything was stripped, so furniture is gone, bank account emptied out, everything was gone in the house, all of which is like, well, okay, things happen. But then also our daughter was gone, which was the disturbing part of it. So physical things, most people realize, can be replaced, and material things. And I had the grand sum of $5.85 in my pocket. And that was it, because I had nothing. And car had gone out not long before that. So I didn't even have a car. So I was really up the creek without a paddle, as they say. But I thought, this is a story, and I've heard other people had experienced similar things. So basically, the novel is about how a parent has to try to recreate their life and start all over again. And the first line of the novel made sense to write it this way, and the line is, "No parent prepares for a child taken." So in other words, a lot of parents, if you're a parent, you prepare for their upbringing in many different ways, by family, by food, by school, by whatever it is that you do. But it probably never crosses your mind that someday you're going to come home and your child is going to be gone. Well, I didn't prepare either, because I don't think there's any way any parent could prepare.
No.
And that's what I'm saying in terms of people finding out, if you were in this situation, as others have found themselves, what do you do? So it was a shock. And I had to say, yeah, I have to try to figure out, how do I go from here? How do I move forward? It's not an easy thing.
So you're talking about how unprepared you were for this. Like, I can't imagine walking through that front door and just the gut-wrenching feeling of what has happened and now what, right? I'm a parent. I have 3 children that are like adults now, but I can't imagine walking into a home full of noise and busyness and toys around the floor and, the general chaos of life, and then walking into a home where that's not there now. I don't know how I would respond to that. Can you take us back to kind of how your initial reaction was and some of the things that were going through your mind?
Sure, I did. I went through there and I said, well, okay, the first thing is, the child is gone. Like, where is she,
Yeah.
for one thing? And at the time she was 5 years old, so she was very small. So I called the school right away. Is she there? Nope, she's not there. So then I have to find out where she was, because my wife had taken her to other places. So I had to go what I call the Rolodex calls, like, all right, well, it could be somewhere, could be there. And in the novel, I call it the Johnsons. It's just a made up name, but
Yeah.
it turns out that this was another family who had picked up our daughter. And to find that out, I said, I really don't know what to do, because before that, I'm thinking, well, where do you go? So I thought, well, maybe I could go to the police, right? Maybe the police can track her down. But police are no help, because it turns out that child hasn't been gone long enough. They have to be gone for some time. And mom took the child. So I go, okay, well, then what do I do now? Basically, legally, the cop is saying, well, you can't do anything. It's an unannounced trip, but she's with her mother, and you can't verify that she's in immediate danger, which no, I can't say that. I just didn't know, and it was unannounced. So when I get a hold of the family who had taken her from the school, the way I found out where she was, because this was in Pennsylvania, across the police radio, the family that took her said California. That was how I found out where she was.
Wow.
So I found out that she was 3,000 miles away.
Wow.
Going through the house, which was in a bit of disarray, I found a note, and the note from my wife said, I'm going to go away for a while. But the interesting thing about it is that that note was tucked into a book on the John Bonet Ramsey child murder. So if you remember this case, it's a very famous case of this young child who apparently was killed by someone. That's been an unsolved murder. So very unsettling.
Yes.
And that sounds like, it seemed like something that was done deliberately. So as I went through the house, I found out what was there, what was left. There wasn't a whole lot. It looked like it was in complete disarray. Found out that looks like somebody emptied out the house very quickly and took all the money. Bank accounts had been emptied and what have you. So found a little note, going through some of the papers, and I found out that there was a double clitoris piercing. And this was from the Bohemian section in Philadelphia, close to where we lived on South Street. And apparently my wife had just gotten that. Very strange, very bizarre. And I thought, I've got to get my child home. So again, what do I do? How do I go about trying to get her back into the state and return 3,000 miles away?
Wow. Amazing. I'm dumbfounded. I don't know how I would respond to this. That would be, I could imagine that a whole array of emotion, like anger, fear, pain, sadness, like everything all at one moment, right?
The closest I could describe it, because yes, all those things are there. It's a whole range of emotions, but it's something like someone just took your guts and just ripped them out of your body, because that's how I felt. So part of the background of this as well in the family, so it depends on family situations are as they are. So because of my job, because of my position, I had actually been primary caretaker for our daughter. So my wife had been working as a x-ray tech and worked double shifts. And actually, I was the one who took care of the baby that entire time, the first year of her life. So I can't complain. It was a wonderful experience. Most fathers don't experience that. Yeah. But actually, I was the one who was home with the baby for about the first 8 or 9 months of her life. And I was the one who rocked her to sleep. I was the one who was with her. And then even when she was 5 years old, when she was taken, still spent a lot of time together because of my wife's schedule, she was out of the home a lot. And then besides sleeping, she didn't really have much time for the family. So again, it was that sort of like, yeah, this is a part of me and part of me is gone. And how do I put that part back and get her back to restored to wholeness and back to California, from California back to Pennsylvania? And so got an attorney, which everybody does. I got to look for an attorney. I'm in big trouble because I had a chance to call my wife, and she said she wouldn't say when she was coming back. And the only way I could get her back was then go to the, someone legal representative. But I've said, this is something that I've heard that happens to men in particular, but have happened to other people, a very similar situation. So that's why I thought it was a decent story, because I think it would be appealing to people who are in this situation, who find themselves completely at a loss. And when their children are gone, what do you do to get them restored? In my case, I never left the home. I had done nothing that would have anyone flee. So, I mean, there's kind of some standard things that happen in relationships. Of course, there are beatings that occur. There are chemical problems, alcohol problems, none of which applied in my situation. So I'm sort of this innocent individual who was then, life was upended as a result, and trying again how to piece back a life that our child had, which was the school that she was in, the home that she was in, and get her restored to the state. And silly me, I think, well, simple, it's pretty obvious. You just go to the court, get an attorney, child comes back, and everything's fine and dandy. Didn't work out that way. No. It turned out to be a 3.5-year battle to try to get her restored to our home.
So she was taken at 5. So you're talking like 8 years old?
So by the time, before she was actually home, it was 3 years later, about 3.5 years later. So it was a 3.5-year battle of trying to oppose just about everybody. And when I say, there's the expression about it takes a village. And I would say, no, I disagree. It does not take a village, because the village can turn against you. And if you're in this situation, the village does turn against you. So this means having to fight attorneys, counselors, neighbors, judges, anybody who's involved in any way, shape, or form, because none of them would see it the way that I saw it, which was, shouldn't the child be returned? And this is why I say the subtitle of the book is in the best interest of the children. Yeah. Mm-hmm. This is what you hear all the time, that you're in a court situation, in family court, and this is in the best interest. And I actually found no one who thought in the best interest of the child at all. There were injuries that I didn't find out about until afterwards. There were things like this that I knew about afterwards. I found out counselors are dead set against you for some reason. They evaluate you. It makes no sense, the kind of evaluation. My substance of the thought is that, this is just a system, and it's a system which is broken, and it's a corrupt system. And I think it's a business. And this is what I found, that everybody's got a piece of the pie, and everybody's getting paid here. Judges, attorneys, counselors, everybody is getting money of this. And so they have no interest in really advocating for the children, nor do they want to change the system. They want it the way it is.
So the novel helps to capture the story of that moment, being, a family that's gone through something extremely tragic. There's the child as well involved. But from your perspective as a father, I think when we were chatting before we got on, that you didn't really feel like there was a lot of support for you in the process, where you had to fight just to be heard or to be acknowledged and supported. And it was like you were the enemy in the process. And it seemed like you had to fight uphill the entire time. And that kind of captures it in the novel, I guess.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, you realize that, no one is going to be for you. I mean, no one. And when I've talked to other people that have been in a situation, particularly men, I'm just blunt with them. They say, what do you think I should do, or what my position is? And I've been very blunt. So I said, look, I'm not trying to be offensive, but here's the bottom line. You're no longer a father. What you have become is a paycheck, and that's all they're interested in, how much money you make. So when I went through part of this process, I would say things like, well, all right, I'm going so-called child support, and I'm giving money to mom. So what happens to that money, and who keeps an account of it? Yeah. There is no account of it. So I asked questions, the attorneys, things like this, saying, well, are you suggesting it's possible that money goes up her nose. I would say, yeah. I mean, that's what it comes down to. So child comes home and there's no jacket. So I would ask questions like, well, where's your winter jacket that I got you? Well, mom didn't give me a winter jacket. So then I have to buy another winter jacket. So what you end up doing is you're paying double. I'd ask an attorney about this and they go, oh, don't bring up anything about the clothes, because the judges are going to rule against you and the judges are going to frown on that. Child doesn't have a winter jacket, go get another winter jacket.
Wow.
Don't even bring it up. So even if I bought a winter jacket, sent the child to mom, had the child for a brief amount of time, and she had no winter jacket, I'd have to go out and buy another winter jacket.
Wow. Interesting. So how has writing this novel helped you in the process to kind of, because I can't imagine this is something you can just deal with over a weekend and be good and continue on with life as if nothing happened. This is going to be something that's always going to be in your mind. How does writing a novel like this help you, first of all, before we talk about how it can help the people that are going to read this novel?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, because this actually happened a very long time ago. So, I mean, there's some water under the bridge in a sense. So, I mean, we're really talking about events that I went through about 1998 to 2001. But to answer the question, it was catharsis for me. So I said I had to process this some way. And since I have an academic background and I do write and I like to read, so I thought, well, what would I do to try to heal myself or to cope with this very unusual situation? And the thing that came to my mind, of course, write it out. So it took about a 2.5-year process to write this thing. And then I sat on it for years, literally years. And when I said, well, now I'm running into other people who are in this very similar situation, maybe it can help other people, because it's not just me. It's apparently something that's been around and happens more to other people. So perhaps it can help others. But I said, at least for myself, I felt writing it through was sort of like exercising the demons and getting them out, because it kind of puts it in context. Because during this kind of process for, say, 3.5 years, you're being buffeted from every direction. And to be in a community where all you're getting is hatred towards you is a very difficult place to be. And dealing with that really means that you've got to be able to process it in such a way. But writing it out, for me, so some people talk about journaling, some people talk about, getting your feelings out on paper. I mean, all those things I think are very helpful. And so for me, that's what worked for me. I would write a story. If it was somebody else, I'd say, yeah, just try to get your thoughts down on paper, because actually dealing with other human beings, you're not necessarily going to get any sympathy. In fact, a lot of people think, well, you must be crazy or else someone wouldn't do this. And I go, no, you got it all wrong. There's a person who's acting crazy. I'm the sane one here. Yeah. And you've got to remind yourself, wait a minute, I'm the one who is in the home. I'm the one who is paying for the home. I eventually paid this house off. I'm the one who's paying for the child's education. I'm the person who is the stable one here. You've got to realize, like, no, the village is crazy. These other people, they don't understand anything of what's going on. I'm the one who's sane, but it's a very difficult thing when you've got 100% of the people that you're actually dealing with who don't see things your way.
Interesting. So you mentioned that you write for other projects as well. What is the difference between writing a novel and writing some of the other works that you have done in the past?
Yeah, again, it's a really good question. So, I mean, in some ways, I would say I am a writer because academically, yes, I mean, I have an academic background, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can write a novel and work of fiction, because it's really a different task. So what I did is I said, well, I started to read books on novel writing and fiction writing, so I can take a certain amount of ability and talent that that I did possess, but then put it in such a way that it can tell a story so that it does come off in a sort of credible, rational way. And so finding out the techniques, like how do you develop characters, how do you write a plot, and how do you plot things out? So there are plot points. And I always thought of this thing as very visual because it's a very visual novel. I mean, there's a lot of things that I said as I'm writing it, I thought I wanted to kind of paint a picture. So it would not be unusual for me to see something that could come out of it, as I'm also a podcaster. So, I mean, there are audio podcasts and there are TV and movies. And so I thought this does lend itself to a visual representation.
Mhm.
So in terms of writing, I was trying to think of it in a visual way to paint a picture through words of what I'm trying to describe.
That's great. Yeah. And throughout the process, this is something that took you time to do and to kind of craft. Who was in your corner supporting you through the writing of this novel?
Well, it sounds like it's pretty much alone. In other words, I'm very
Okay.
fortunate having good parents, but they were also, my dad has passed away in the meantime, but they also were almost 3,000 miles away. So I'm in Pennsylvania, they're in Arizona. My sister is in California. So, I mean, yes, I do feel as though they were very supportive. I can't complain about anything that happened during that period of time. But in terms of being close or physically close, there really wasn't anybody. The closest family I had about 2.5 hours drive
Wow.
away. Very difficult to, for them. And I think a lot of particularly fathers that are in this situation, well, most people will tell you they don't understand because they've never experienced it. And so for a lot of men, what they are told is something along the lines of, just move on, get on with your life. And at some point, your child is going to come back to you. But that's not my view of marriage. That's not my view of life. I think God put together a man and a woman together to have children. And I believe in the concept of marriage, which I always did. And I always thought, well, no, there's something wrong about this. This is disordered. There is something that is going against God's plan for life and for children, because I think the child should have access to equally to a mother and a father. They need them both. So I'd give you an example, as this is one of the examples I use at the playground. It's not to say one is better than the other. There's no such thing. But when a child approaches a playground, what mom will say to the child is, be careful, don't fall, watch yourself. Whereas the father tends to say things like, hey, go for it, have fun, enjoy yourself. Now, I'm not saying either one is right, but I think from a child's point of view, they need to hear both. Because yes, a playground can be a dangerous place. Mm-hmm. Things can happen. You can have accidents, you can fall, but on the same time, it's also a fun place. So you should enjoy yourself. And I think for a child, they need full and complete access, regardless of what a mother and father are interacting with themselves, between themselves. They just need to have the benefit for the child and give everything that they can to the child or children.
It's interesting, Mick. So as I think about this and as you're speaking, I'm picturing the person that's going to pick up this book or listen to an Audible version or however they're going to find this. And I picture three people potentially coming across your novel: the father, the mother, and the child. And I'm wondering how each one of these would react to this novel and what this novel could do to help them avoid some of this pain. How can this novel help those three people potentially as they go through this?
Totally agree. Yes. And so what I would say is that this is what I'm trying to get across with saying, regardless of how mom and dad feel about each other, and if they don't like each other, that's okay. But whether it's the mother or the father, bear in mind that the child has the blood and the DNA of both and needs to have full and complete access to both. So never alienate, because this is a pretty common phenomenon. One party is upset at the other party, and then they use the child as the football and the thing that's in between. And no, this is a child. So I'll give you an example. It's one of the key scenes that I wrote in the novel, because the psychiatrist will interview you, and they interview all three. And the psychiatrist asks the child to say, well, draw a picture of your family. So you have a small child, in the case here, between 5 and 8 years old. They can't really talk, and they can't necessarily articulate it. And you know what they're coming down to. If it's a bright kid, they're figuring out, oh, I'm picking between mommy and daddy, which is a horrible place. So it's to really, you want to avoid those kinds of situations if at all possible, keep the kids involved. But in this case, it does happen. So the child drew a picture, and it's actually going to be on the cover of the novel as well, too. But it shows the child as a baby being held by the father. Now, it's very interesting how that picture was interpreted by the psychiatrist. The psychiatrist concluded, when asking the child the question, how do you see your family? And the fact that the child wrote and drew a picture close to the father, the psychiatrist wrote that up as the father is putting pressure on the child.
Wow. Wow.
And this came out of a session that I was not a part of. I was not physically there. And to me, in my mind, this is very revealing. The child is simply being very truthful and being very honest. And it's not to say one is better than the other. So I am fully, completely saying, I'm not going to say one parent is better than the other. There's no such thing. Child needs both. Yeah. And I also would say during this particular process, I said to attorneys, for example, you know what? We could solve this. It's a pretty easy way to solve this entire situation. And they say, well, how would you solve it? I said, well, give me full and complete physical custody. And how is that a solution? I said, well, because I would never take the child away from the mother. I didn't. Therefore, there is no conflict. That's the end of the conflict right there. So if one of the warring parties is the problem, the whole idea is to eliminate the problem. If one is the taking of the child, that's probably not the best one for the child to be with. And in this situation, we can find out a number of things that occurred like that. Mom showed up at a later date, took the child again. Well, wait a minute. Once is bad, twice is really bad. Isn't it kind of obvious that there is some sort of situation that's going on here? And so, the phrase is alienation, just alienating the child away from the other partner and the other person that's involved. It should never happen.
So Mick, my thoughts go to, as well, while you're talking, to your daughter today. And I'm hoping, and I'm understanding that she's doing well, and your relationship is strong. Do you think your daughter's going to be reading this novel?
When she was a little bit older, like I said, this went back, and I didn't really think about necessarily publishing it. It was just something that she experienced, I experienced, and she was a little bit older, like say teenager. Then I said, why don't you read it? And she read it, kind of breezed through it, and then said, I'll have to read it again sometime, which she didn't, because I think she saw it firsthand and she already lived through it. Yeah. But in kind of debriefing, through this, when I could not find her or didn't know where she was for about this 3-year period, she ended up with all kinds of strangers, people that I didn't know, and also some of the problematic neighbors also. I would ask her, like, well, where were you? What was going on? And what she said was very interesting. She said, I don't remember. I think she blocked out a lot as well, too. So what I would say is the fact that she was returned home at 8 years old. So I raised her as a single father from the time she was 8 until she was 18. And that was my entire goal, get her to adulthood. So she was 18 and went off to college. I go, well, now she's an adult. So whatever goes on at 18 plus, you're always connected, but that's what I'm responsible for. So 18 above, you're an adult, she's on her own, independent, which is great. But yes, by the time she got to be 18, she was in great shape. She did very well in high school. She did very well in college, went off to a very prestigious college. And so I thought, well, for all the people who are against me, it's kind of like, well, it's like, here's the vindication. I'm the guy that nobody saw that I could do this and that I wasn't qualified. It ended up completely alone, raising her as a full-time single father. By the time she was 18, she was in great shape, all of which I was trying to tell them, look, return her to her home, return her to her house, return her to her school, return her to her family, and get a normal life for her, what I would perceive as normal. And that's what happened. And she was fine.
I can see a lot of people are going to be able to relate to this novel, and it's going to stir up a lot of emotion. So as a reader, when they get your book and they go through this, what is your takeaway? What is the end game? What is the end message for a reader going through this novel? Again, they could be the father in the situation, they could be the mother, they could be the child. Somebody's going to read this and connect with this, maybe based on their own life story or something similar, or maybe a friend's experienced it. What do you want them to walk away with from this novel?
Yeah, I think the whole bottom line is why I said it came to why I wanted to dust it off and really release it was the fact that I ran into too many people where this had happened. Because when I would explain something along these lines, I go, well, yeah, that happened to me, or I know somebody, or I have a friend, or something along those lines. So I would say, because we talked about this before, and I said, I'm a little bit of that 60s, 70s idealism that you can change the world. So I would hope that what people would do would be to wake them up to what a family court will actually do, which is very harmful to the child and very harmful to families. And if you can avoid this situation, and yes, if that other partner is annoying you, I'd say put up with a little bit more annoyances for the sake of your children. And avoid it if you can, but if you cannot, at least be aware of the fact that this is a very precarious situation to place a child and a family in, and don't do it if you can. However, it may find some solace that you can come out of it and you can prosper from it. But I also think it should be kind of an eye opener, the fact that it would change people. That's why I'm saying there's a touch of idealism in me to say, I'd hope that with a little bit of idealism that people might be more concerned about it as a public issue and as a political issue, as a legal issue, that yes, this is something that needs to be addressed because it's definitely a wrong thing to happen. And it should never happen to children. It should never happen to families.
It's amazing. Mick, I really do appreciate your time to unpack this. And again, this is the first time we've had a novelist on the podcast, and I'm captivated by the process. I'm captivated by the story. You as a person and your devotion to your daughter in all of this is outstanding, really is. And as a father, I just celebrate the fact that you never gave up. And even though when things were all against you, you didn't listen to the voices that said to quit. You didn't. You just kept going. So congratulations on doing that, and to put your thoughts into a novel to share with others, to help others. It's outstanding. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us.
Appreciate the kind words. Never sign off on your children ever under any circumstances. That child needs to know that you always fought for that child and that you are acting in the best interest of that child.
We may, as parents, make many mistakes in life.
Yep.
But we always come back to loving our kids and doing everything we possibly can with our very last breath for our children. And I think you're demonstrating that today to the people listening. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for your time, Dave. Appreciate it very much.
So the book, Burning America in the Best Interest of the Children, ? Will be coming out soon, and we'll make sure we have links to everything. What is the best way for people to get in contact with you, Mick? Maybe they have a question about the book. Maybe they have a question about you. Maybe they need you as a speaker. I know you have a podcast as well. So what is the best way for people to find you and connect with you after the podcast?
Sure. The best way is I'm going to keep continuing updates on Instagram, and there's an Instagram account, Burning America. So on Instagram, Burning America. And if you want to get a hold of me directly, I'm more than happy to talk to anybody as well. And you can get a hold of me at my email, which is Mick, as in Jagger, except he makes more money, mick.smith@wsiworld.com, mick.smith@wsiworld.com.
Excellent. We'll put links to all that information in the show notes as well, so you can reference that at any point. And when the book is live, let us know, and we will promote the book as well, being available to everybody to purchase. And we want them to go buy this novel as soon as possible.
Well, let's change the world.
That's
and
right.
Fight for those kids.
Exactly. And it starts here with this podcast and with this novel. And I'm really excited to share it with everybody. Mick, thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate it, Dave. Good seeing you
Excellent.
again.
Excellent. Hi, guys. This is Dave from Living the Next Chapter, a podcast designed to connect authors and audiences. We're always on the lookout for our next interview. If you're an author, a publisher, and you have a book, whether you're just starting, whether you're halfway through writing, or it's all done and you want to tell the world, that's why we're here at Living the Next Chapter. Get in touch with us through livingthenextchapter.com, contact us, and let's set up some time together to discuss your book, to discuss your project, and how we can get you on the show. My name is Dave, and I would love to speak to you. So go to livingthenextchapter.com, and let's get over there together and discuss all the great things that you're up to as an author, as a publisher, and let's grow your audience together. Join us on livingthenextchapter.com for great authors and an audience that's eager to hear about what you're up to as an author and a publisher. Contact us today and let's get your book out in front of others. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.